So hello fellow Earthlings. This is Earthling 6455463728. And how many people do you depend on to keep your standard of living where it is? I mean, how many laborers harvesting rubber does it take to make your tires? So I am Earthling 64 yada yada yada. And 1 year I sat down and made, I'd say around 25,000 phone calls in order to get email addresses to send out to people about my programming business. I started a local newspaper in my area, and I did everything from reporting to taking photographs to delivering the newspapers, all of that. I am an ex-reservist in the Army, so I have a small amount of military experience. For example, standing on parade for hours at a time. I've been in the Leaning Tower of Pisa. I've also been in the middle of Caracas, Venezuela, looking 360 degrees all around me and seeing how far Caracas extends. Also been to Las Vegas and the Grand Canyon, which is magnificent. And I've taken apart a washing machine and put it back together, among other repairs like PC repairs and stuff. So that's me. Now, how many people do you actually depend on the daily or on the monthly or on the yearly for your standard of living? I mean, many of us really don't think about it. We know, but we don't really think about it, do we? For example, many of us like our bananas. How many hands did those bananas pass through on their way from Costa Rica or the Philippines or wherever? How many different poor people had to plant those banana trees and then harvest the bananas and wash them in whatever pesticides or fungicides they use, and then wrap them up and send them on your way? How many different Mexican laborers had to pick those apples that we like to eat? How many hands touch the cocoa that we use and the chocolate that we eat or the drinks that we drink? Or how many hands touched each of those tea leaves that we might have in a cup of tea? We really never really think about it, do we? And the strawberries, those things that have to be very daintily held and carefully placed here and there. And the clothes and the shoes that we buy that, are put together by somebody, probably in China or Thailand or Vietnam. They are working in some sweatshop however many hours per day, making almost nothing, so that these shoes and clothes will be cheap enough for us to buy, right? And how many hands put together the iPhone or the Android that we use every day without a thought, or the drill, or the fan, or anything that was made in China or India or some other place? We really don't give it much thought. I was looking at a documentary, it's DW, is it? I don't know the name of the organization, but it's like a DW, a German news organization or documentary organization. And they were doing a piece on tires. And, the guy, he goes to Thailand, I think it was, and he's looking at how the natural rubber is actually collected. And they're showing you that people cut strips of bark off of the trees, and they have to work like I think, is it 5 days a week, 12 hours every day, oftentimes at night. And they make a strip off of the bark of the tree that makes the tree bleed. And there's a little cup that hangs on the tree to collect the sap. And it collects into this container. And when it does, they go from tree to tree, collecting each of these little globs of rubber. And these people are saying there was a guy there who was like 80 years old, and he was saying how he'd been doing this all of his life. And I just got to thinking, this guy, he has never probably left his country. He's probably never left his village. And this is what he's been doing, amongst other things. I mean, he's had kids, he's had a family, he's probably had happy days and sad days. But here it is that he has been gathering this sap for all of his life. Probably. Maybe he's had other jobs, I don't know. But how many of these half a fist, like half a ball of artificial rubber he's had to collect in his life to make one tire for us to drive from, the suburbs, wherever we live, and then to work and then come back. And we think of each of these tires as, they might be somewhat expensive, but we don't think of how many thousands, maybe hundreds of hours that these poor people who will never own a car have had to spend, spraying weed killer, planting these rubber plants, walking from where they live to the plantation, and basically never using or enjoying any of these things that we in the developed world use on a regular basis. Something that, you buy. How often do you buy tires? Not that often, right? But it took them so much time to gather the material to do that. And they will probably never own a car. I mean, maybe somebody they know owns a car, but I don't know how they can, seeing as these people make like $100 per month. That's like, amazing for them. $100 a month. After you have fed yourself and clothed yourself and, maybe bought some books or something. Can you even buy books for your children to learn to read with that amount of money? Who is there below you? Because there has to be someone below you, because it's a pyramid, right? It's a big pyramid where each of us in the developed world who earns maybe thousands of dollars a month or at least a year are able to have all of these hundreds, maybe thousands of people beneath us in the quote-unquote food chain, collecting the rubber that we need to make these tires for us to drive all over the place and have coffee in the morning. How long did it take to pick that coffee that we use in a cup of coffee? You have the bean. I'm sure you dry it, you grind it up. We have coffee beans. We have the actual coffee beans. How long did it take to collect those coffee beans that we just drink? How many cups a day of coffee that people have? And we never think about that, right? We never think that somebody's hands were actually on those beans that we might see in a coffee grinder. And we never think of how many hands were on this phone that we use putting together all these different components, and how those people themselves will probably never enjoy a phone, especially an iPhone, of the price that we pay, and we think nothing of it. And in thinking about all of that, it just made me feel, and this is part of the worst thing of it. The worst part of it was that, okay, you have these rubber plantations, but in one place in Thailand, I think it was, the government had seized some people's lands and sold it to multinational corporations, I think, to grow more rubber. So now these people no longer had lands that they could use to grow food on. If they chose to, and in this case as yet they did not choose to, they would have to work on the rubber plantations and use the money from that to buy food from somebody else who is even poorer than them, or maybe richer than them, because they still had those people that they're buying their food from would still have their land, right? But now you have to pay that extra profit for someone else to live, whereas you could have grown and harvested your own food on this land that you had. Now you need to pay someone else so that they can survive on the money that they're profiting from you, based on what they're doing. So now you are a cog in the wheel, and you have even less than you had before. And as more and more people become wealthy enough every day, based on whatever they're doing, I don't know. Maybe it is that they got a city job as opposed to a rural job. More and more tracts of land are going to need to be cleared to make more and more rubber for us to drive. But aren't we going to need more and more people to collect the sap to make the rubber? So every additional car tire will need additional land that is not for food, but just to grow rubber to put on some car tires. And we're going to need more people harvesting that rubber, who are probably going to be in a worse situation than before. Everybody's not going to be able to move to the city and have this better quality of life that we think of. So we are just those of us who can afford a car, we are just putting more and more people into harvesting cocoa and harvesting coffee and bananas and strawberry, and being in factories putting together our phones and putting together our shoes and our clothing and all of these different things. So if each of us currently has hundreds or thousands of people below us in the food chain, we're going to need even more people. But we want those people in those countries to have less kids. And if they have a lot of kids, we think that that's not good. So who is going to do all these things cheaply so we can have a cheap cup of coffee and a cheap cup of cocoa or chocolate bar or clothes or shoes or all of these different things? What kind of crazy world are we living in? I talked to some of my friends and they think robots are going to do it. Well, didn't Elon Musk just try that the other day with Tesla? And he almost drove his company into the ground because as it turns out, robots can't do a lot of the things that he thought that they could, like pushing their hands through, a car door in order to connect two electrical joints to each other. Apparently, a robot can't do that. So he had to give up on that entire idea of making his plant completely mechanized. So we're just gonna have to use people, more and more and more people who are never going to be able to use these products themselves. And I hate that. And I want to live a simpler life so that I am not at the top of some pyramid enjoying the spoils of all of these people's labors. Maybe they should just keep some of their land to grow food for themselves without having to pay somebody else to feed them with the less resources that they have. Anyway, that's it for me. So feel free to like, subscribe, share, dislike, not like, not listen to any of those things. Keeping in mind, just doing what you would like somebody like me to do if this were your recording. Have a good one. Peace.